Good morning. It's another beautiful day in New York City, though we do have the extent of another heat wave. Hopefully it breaks tomorrow. For those of you who think there isn't any change in the climate, you're wrong. There is a change in the climate. It was predicted in the 1970s by Mr. Press, who worked for NASA, who sent a memorandum to Jimmy Carter stating that by 2000, we were going to see overheating of the planet because of carbon emissions. And by 2023, we would be at a pivot point. Well, if you think that's not happening, you're not living. I think you got to get out of the cave. Because for the rest of us, folks are dying. In Phoenix, where they're actually recording deaths, they're seeing 500 more people die due to the heat. In Europe last year alone, I think they had between 15 and 60,000 people dying from the heat. We've got heat waves here, flooding in Greece. They said there's just a lull in the Canadian fires now. What are we doing about it? Well, a lot of folks are now waking up and saying, we want to reclaim our land. The indigenous population of Hawaii wants to reclaim the Hawaiian Islands, and specifically Maui, so that they can regenerate the soil. If it goes back to the market society that we know, what'll happen? The land will be developed again, it'll be overused, abused, and then they'll get the high winds and drought and lose their water resources for good. But with the indigenous people who are stewards of the land, giving them sovereignty is like saying, here, please develop the land for us so that we can have the winter and summer playgrounds that we're used to. You want to sell it to developers? You know what? Let the indigenous folks have the 1,000-year leases on the land and let them decide where the land can be developed and let them collect the rents for all of these properties. It's fair, it's just, and it would help all of us because we'd see how they are indeed able to reclaim land. Once again, the growing of alfalfa is destroying another landmark, the Great Salt Lake. Because so much water is going to big agri and monocrops that are water intensive. The Great Salt Lake is now drying up, and when it does, it's going to have toxic dust spewing all over the state of Utah. It's a mecca now. It's an in place for folks to go because it's got beautiful mountains. It's got lovely playgrounds. It's just a gorgeous, gorgeous state with a lot of entrepreneurs. But within 5 years, when the Great Salt Lake is dry, there's not going to be enough water for everyone. It's the same thing in Africa. Banks are giving trillions to the fossil fuel industry. Fossil fuels are big carbon emitters. Also, they only make just so much electricity for the African grid. But when the Africans want to purchase solar power or wind power, they're being charged 15% interest. They can't afford the renewables, though they would have 4 times the power that a fossil fuel generator gives them. Not only that, they're being encouraged to go big agri. Well, they go big agri, they destroy their forests, They destroy what little water they have left. And what happens? Sure, somebody in the world will be fed, but they'll be starving in Africa. They should be raising holy moly about what's happening in the Ukraine because they're not getting the wheat that Russia is holding hostage. They shouldn't be pro-Russia. They should be pro-Ukraine. Ukraine is 25% of the breadbasket. Let the grain flow to Africa so that they don't have to rely on the tales of getting wealthy via Big Agri. Big Agri is destroying our world along with fossil fuels. We can't tolerate all these carbon emissions because we're going into a feedback loop that will be hot and hotter. The oceans will be hot. The Antarctica is melting at a great rate. And we're going to have more forest fires that we can't control. It's time to think about what we're doing and plan for our future. I've said it before, I'll say it again. We need to be on the War Production Act. Remember, Henry Ford I was a pacifist when it came to World War II until he realized he could make more money catering to the war effort than he could just building cars. And speaking of building cars, you know, Elon Musk has done a lot of things we may not like and things we think are phenomenal. Well, out of the phenomenal, he's going to be building a $25,000 car. Totally electric. That will be affordable to most people. $25,000, I think, is a good entry price. If you can go lower, great, but $25,000 is what they're projecting, and I think that's a win-win. And if he would only just keep the satellites on in Ukraine, we'd all be quite fine. Speaking of keeping the lights on, yeah, I'm getting a poster out there for my write-in campaign for District Councilwoman, District 6. Many of you know I'm on social media. I believe in voting and voting rights. It's interesting, I get New Jersey information in my email box. I get it from Nashville. I get ProPublica. I get the Utah Entrepreneurs. So I read a lot. You guys all know that I'm for shutting down Rikers Island. It's more than just shutting jails. It looks like prisons in this country are a major industry. And my feeling about prisons are there's got to be a way to avoid prison. You know where we have the most crime in our cities? That's where we should be putting our police and having them there not as adversaries, but to try to work with the kids before they've got the gangs, before they've got the guns, so that we can stop the violence. We need social workers. We need psychiatrists. We need community leaders. We need community centers, places where kids can go to work on a trade, to become apprentices, to do something so that they're not idle and forming gangs. Then we wouldn't need places like Rikers or other prisons where people are abused for years and years and years and warehoused. And what's worse, they're even maintained as part of a voting population for that state. So it's not the way to go, folks. Jail is not the way to go it should be a last resort for violent criminals. Our society should take a good look at itself. And when we do, we should realize and acknowledge we can do better. This market society, where everyone knows only a few make it and the rest of us barely eke out a living, that's not good enough. No, we don't have the outward corruption of, say, the Congo or Sudan or other countries around the world, El Salvador, others. But we've got corruption here, big time, and they're men or women in Armani suits, and they look wonderful, and they speak beautifully, but they're taking the cash, and they're not accounting for it. If I were giving out money for COVID today, I'd make sure that I was invested in where that money was being spent. Because right now, it's being reported that 90,000 deaths occurred in this country between 2020 and 2022 from cardiovascular events. 90,000 extra, and now we know it's attributable to COVID-19. So when you're advising folks not to get the vaccine, you're hurting someone's life, and it's not somebody who's older like me. No, most of those deaths were within the age group of 25 to 44. Older people you expect to have a cardiovascular event. Younger people, absolutely not. So when the new vaccines come out in the fall, absolutely make sure you're right up there getting that vaccine. Do it for COVID, RSV, and the flu, and be safe. Be safe and be well. And then you can vote and help others who are younger to start being involved in our country. I see the momentum has started. Let's make it a landslide where everyone's involved in our future, because it can be better than it is. Thank you.